hi. Sorry I am late again. It seems to be becoming a thing, but we did have an amazing group of people at our hangout last night, which ran, I think, almost till 11 p.m. It's January 21 now. It's the first full day that the bad man is back in charge, and he's already done tremendous damage with his words, his actions, I think most of all his actual presence in our lives. Yesterday I caught up with former Boston Globe, now MSNBC, Daily Beast, and his own Truth and Consequences Substack, Michael Cohen. And we talked yesterday after the inauguration and then the address to some of his supporters, which was actually longer than the inauguration, where he said all the real gross stuff. That's about when Michael and I talked before all the executive orders were signed and he sat down in the Oval Office. But Michael and I begin the conversation at 28 minutes today, if you want to jump to it. But last night I hosted a hangout with over 60 of you joining me, and while we discussed exactly what was happening right in front of us, as you know, Elon Musk doing a couple Nazi salutes and bad men, the bad man pardoning a whole bunch of other very bad men, we still last night found a way to have some really great laughs. So it was really nice to see so many of you there. I'm going to continue the Monday and Thursday hangouts because I think they bring so many people so much peace and joy during our latest descent into chaos, as our recurring nightmare is making its best effort to haunt us as we move through our lives together. I want to try to be there with you and for you as you have been and continue to be for me. I highly encourage you to join those hangouts. Monday and Thursdays, 8 p.m. East. If you can't be there in person, you're a paid subscriber, you should get a link to the hangouts in an email the next day, and you can go watch or listen and see what was said and hopefully have some laughs and learn some things along the way and find some solidarity and fight the loneliness that can be very, very depressing and challenging. So the hangout is in, the link is in today's show email. I hope that you will be a part of those because they become increasingly important when we become increasingly isolated and scared. And that's a lot of what is happening. So let's acknowledge that. And let's try to stay connected and bring new people into our community. Tell them about our community. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. This is my work. I can't do it without you and keep this going without you. So really vitally important for me to be able to do it is for us to be able to grow it and keep it. So thank you for being here as we begin this second term of the very bad man. A man with absolutely zero redeeming qualities, no good personality characteristics at all. A salesman who has sold poison his entire life. A man whose own wife won't touch him. She could barely dance with him. She wore a hat that prevented her from actually getting her face close enough to kiss him. That hat was keeping him away. I mean, nobody likes the man that knows him, and everybody is grifting off of him, and he off of them. They all know it, but that is where we are at, and I've got to be here every day with you. That's my thing. That's my plan. I want to continue doing that going forward. Today was a very challenging day to press record and get this program started because of the feelings that we're all feeling. It's very difficult, of course. Part of what keeps me going is producing the show and looking for and watching smart, thoughtful, passionate, righteous, good people saying things. That's what helps me get through my day as I think about it all, as I try to digest it all, and then, of course, share it with you here on Stand Up. So there I was really struggling this morning with what to say and how to cover all of this today and moving forward. And I was reminded of Kimberly Richardson's words last night, she reminded us that it was Dr. King's birthday and that she was at an event yesterday celebrating him. And she mentioned the speech that Dr. King's daughter, Bernice King, made yesterday, and I hadn't seen it when Kimberly talked about it. She brought us back to Dr. King's birthday, not the inauguration, which I think was helpful at the hangout last night. But then I found the speech this morning, and I thought it was very moving in her call to commemorate the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King, Bernice King, who's very accomplished herself, discussed the future of the country under Trump's second term and how her father's ideas of love and power remain relevant. And so I think that's where I want to start this morning, because it helped me get myself ready to do the show. And so maybe it will do a little something, give you a bit of a charge as well. Here we go. About 4 minutes.
Today marks 40 years since the inception of the national holiday, and this is only the third time it has coincided with the presidential inauguration. However, this time it has become a major factor for so many people because of the notable contrast in the two men who are sharing the same space in today's news cycle and on today's Gregorian calendar. For some, today's inauguration represents the best of times, make America great again. And for others, it highlights the worst of times, set America back again. For some, today's King holiday represents a day to champion freedom, justice, and democracy. For others, it's a day to decry DEI, disavow a legacy of peace, love, and justice, and distort the meaning of King's words. But regardless of how this day shows up for you, we must remember the mission and be in pursuit of it. Now, one of the most important words in the Holy Bible is remember. It is when the children of Israel forgot that they lost ground, were set back, and became subject to ruthless leaders. Instead of focusing on the land that God had promised them, the people were afraid and complained about the obstacles and the enemies. As a result, the very thing they feared came upon them, and that generation never reached the promised land. My father and those that aligned with his leadership were faced with impossible circumstances. They dealt with recalcitrant and defiant leaders. They lacked political representation. They didn't have laws or policies in place to buttress them. Yet they didn't recoil or retreat. In spite of Bull Connor and his dogs, water hoses, and billy clubs, in spite of Governor George Wallace, who said segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, in spite of Sheriff Jim Clark, who used violence to beat back people seeking to register to vote, in spite of Southern Dixiecrats, who were determined to keep segregation legal by signing a Southern Manifesto, today's Project 2025. Despite all they faced, it was with the power of a soul force generated by love, a spiritual determination to stay focused on mission, and a belief that with God nothing is impossible, that they were able to destroy de jure by law segregation without destroying people. They were able to get the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act signed into law. They understood that the mission was greater than any political party or governor, mayor, police commissioner, congressperson, senator, or president. It was a mission ultimately commanded by God to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God.
All right, there you go. Bernice King bringing us our good stuff this morning, getting us started. There's a lot more where that came from. I encourage you to watch the whole rest of her speech. And also want to mention in good stuff something really sad and terrible, but it's good because Cecile Richards passed away, and that's awful, but she inspired so many people to live lives of service, and she made a real difference in the lives of millions of women and anyone who has ever had to deal with reproductive rights or have access to abortion and women's health care. Cecile Richardson, I interviewed her several times. I hosted a function with her in Atlanta thanks to Eric Segall years ago for Planned Parenthood. She was a real force. She was compelling and passionate and so strong and brilliant, just like her mom, and she will be missed. But man, just being in her presence was something that for me, very, very proud to have been connected to her so many times and inspired by her work. And just, wanting to make people like her proud, knowing that I was doing purposeful things and work. And so to see her gone is tough. But like my friend Dr. Merton Running Wolf, who we lost last week, she is somebody who has inspired me for a real long time. So rest in peace, Cecile Richards. Wanted to mention that because of the positive impact, the unparalleled positive impact that she made in the lives of so many, including me. And I found this interview that she did just under a year ago where she was asked about moral leadership and what that meant. And I feel like Cecile's answer in this is so relatable to me and for so many of us. I think that we're kind of born with a lot of opportunities that it resonated, and I wanted to share it with you because she perfectly articulates for me why I do this work and live the life that I live and the way that I live it, or at least try to. I really do, and I just love this.
Our series of interviews attempts to convey what moral leadership looks like. I'm wondering how you define moral leadership and why there's such a need for it now.
I mean, I think that as a person growing up where you have the opportunity and or are kind of forced to witness injustice, whether it's racial or economic, gender, I think moral leadership is doing something about it, and with all humility. And it may be something tiny, it may be something big, but I feel like we were put on this earth to make a difference. And particularly people like myself, who grew up with enormous privilege. I could do anything I wanted to with my life, right? To me, the gift to me was being able to choose to be an organizer, to choose to be a troublemaker. And so I take that privilege seriously. And so I guess for me, moral leadership is taking the gifts that you were given and doing something with them to make the world better.
Yes, there it is. Cecile Richards did just that so well as anybody that I've ever known. And I'm so grateful to have known her and inspired by those words and so many more in her moral leadership. Okay, well, speaking of moral leaders, Megan, who you might know from our hangouts, she was at PODJAM last year. She has become a good, trusted friend of mine, lives nearby in New York. She is a very educated, very smart, very passionate, righteous, hilarious, thoughtful woman. And she sent this in for the good stuff. I really appreciate you, Megan, and this. It is the rendition of a poem called Be Kind to Yourself that is written by Sophie Diener and being read, or I guess performed in a way, by Stage Door Johnny on TikTok, who I really enjoyed this. So Megan, thank you for submitting it. Be kind to yourself. Take it away, Johnny.
I hope today you remember that the sky is not humiliated by its vastness, and the mountains remain unashamed of their height. Mother Earth and her oceans are not afraid of their size, and the sun is not concerned if someone has to squint their eyes. It will shine, and it will not apologize for its light. And like the trees teach us that it's okay to lose our leaves as seasons change and then come back to life, I hope that nature teaches us to look at ourselves and be kind. I hope that we don't dim or shrink or fold into spaces far too tight. Yes, today, I hope you look at yourself and you are kind.
Yeah, I like that. I thought it was good. I thought it was very good. Megan, thank you very much for sending that in for your good stuff. And that is your good stuff for today. I almost felt like I should do the whole show with just this kind of stuff. But I am going to try to open it every day this way in a positive way. And if you don't like it and you just want to get to the headlines, you can always jump to that. And if you want to skip the daily news and just get to the interview, you can get to that. It's really kind of 3 shows in one that way. And here for you every day, always available in Discord for connection, so find people there and, of course, at our Hangouts. Thank you very much for any submissions you have for any part of the show, but especially the good stuff. And now on to today's headlines. Are there any? Is there any news? Feels like the biggest news yesterday was actually Elon Musk's 2 Hitler salutes. I feel like that was a pretty big deal. And then, of course, the executive orders that the bad man signed, this barrage as he kicked off his presidency. And, of course, the biggest was probably the pardoning of everybody that was involved in January 6th, even the worst of the worst. But back to the executive orders for a moment. I think it's really important to know what they were. I hope that you've familiarized yourselves with these lists. I know it's easy to look away, but we need to keep track of what's happening. We can't allow it to happen without paying attention. I know it's hard, but I'm going to be here doing it every day. But here's some of the orders that he signed on his first day in office. I'm going to read them to you. It takes about, I think, 4, almost 5 minutes here. Here we go. Buckle in. This one's going to be emotional, really. Hard to hear it, but I'm going for it. First, for the federal workforce, freeze federal hiring except for members of the military or positions related to immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety. Restore a category of federal workers known as Schedule F, which would lack the same job protections enjoyed by career civil servants. Halt new federal rules from going into effect before Trump administration appointees can review them. Review the investigative actions of the Biden administration to, quote, correct the past misconduct by the federal government related to weaponization of law enforcement and weaponization of the intelligence community. Grant top security clearances to White House staff without going through traditional vetting procedures. End remote work policies and order federal workers back to the office full time. So, yeah, it's already angst giving and hard to hear. That's just the federal workforce. On the immigration and border, here are some of the executive orders. Bar asylum for people newly arriving at the southern border. Move to end birthright citizenship, which is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. He can't do that. He can't just sign an executive order overturning the 14th Amendment. In one moment, he's talking about the rule of law, and the next moment, he's trying to overturn the law. So we'll see what happens, as that's going to be challenged, as most of these will be. Suspend the refugee admissions program until such time as the further entry in the United States of refugees aligns with interests of the United States. Declare migrant crossings along the U.S.-Mexico border to be a national emergency, allowing the bad man to unilaterally unlock federal funding for border wall construction without approval from Congress for stricter enforcement efforts. Resume a policy requiring people seeking asylum to wait in Mexico while an immigration judge considers their cases. Consider designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. On gender and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, he terminated DEI programs across the federal government. Recognized 2 sexes, male and female. And Elon. Also, remove protections for transgender people in federal prisons. On trades and tariffs, he directed the federal agencies to begin an investigation into trade practices, including persistent trade deficits and unfair currency practices, as well as examine flows of migrants and drugs from Canada, China, and Mexico and the United States. Access China's compliance with a trade deal Mr. Badman signed in 2020, as well as the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, which he signed in 2020 to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement. He ordered the government to assess the feasibility of creating an external revenue service to collect tariffs and duties. We already have that, so that would be redundant and ridiculous and an expansion of government and wasteful, but yeah, I guess it sells. Carry out a full review of the U.S. industrial and manufacturing base to assess whether further national security-related tariffs are warranted. On energy and the environment, executive orders. Withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement, the pact amongst almost all nations to fight climate change. Declare a national energy emergency, a first in U.S. history, which could unlock new powers to suspend certain environmental rules or expedite permitting of certain mining projects. An executive order in an attempt to reverse Mr. President Biden's ban on offshore drilling for 625 million acres of federal waters. began the repeal of Biden-era regulations on tailpipe pollution from cars and light trucks, which have encouraged automakers to manufacture more electric vehicles. Oh, great, because we need more tailpipe pollution. That's what you voted for. Roll back energy efficiency regulations for dishwashers, shower heads, and gas stoves. Open the Alaska wilderness to more oil and gas drilling. I don't think anybody even wants to anymore. Restart reviews of new export terminals for liquefied natural gas, something the Biden administration had paused. Halt the leasing of federal waters for offshore wind farms. Eliminate environmental justice programs across the government, which are aimed at protecting poor communities from excess pollution. Who cares about them? Review all federal regulations that impose an undue, quote, undue burden on the development or use of a variety of energy sources, particularly coal, oil, natural gas, nuclear power, hydropower, and biofuels. Then on to executive order on the TikTok ban. Consult federal agencies on any security risks posed by the social media platform, then pursue a resolution that protects national security while saving a platform used by 170 million Americans. He also ordered his attorney general not to enforce a law that banned the site for 75 days to give his administration the, quote, opportunity to determine the appropriate course forward. And under the category of other executive orders, withdraw from the World Health Organization, which will result in the deaths of thousands, if not millions, of people around the world. Rename Mount Denali and the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. Ensure the states carrying out the death penalty have a, quote, sufficient supply of lethal injection drugs. It's a little on the nose, isn't it? Come on. Fly the American flag at full staff on Monday on future inauguration days. Implement Department of Government Efficiency, the Elon Musk-led cost-cutting initiative, and revoke security clearances for 51 signers of letter suggesting that the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop could be Russian disinformation. That's it. That's the list of executive orders compiled by the New York Times and other news agencies. And, of course, the other huge story late last night was the January 6th pardons. With the stroke of the pen, the new president erased the biggest and most complex investigation in the history of the Justice Department, and he pardoned even Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boys leader. He commuted the sentence of Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers militia. He granted clemency to nearly all 1,600 people charged over the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021. And there is shame coming from across the political spectrum, even on the right. But, of course, the new president is never running again, and he has no shame. But Stephen Hayes says, an utter disgrace, sad and shameful moment for our country. Senator Chris Murphy, an endorsement of political violence, a guarantee that it will return, an unconscionable act. Jane Nordlinger, for 3 or 4 days, Republicans, by and large, were ashamed of January 6th. In short order, the rioters were patriots and political prisoners. After October 7th, Trump started calling them hostages. Today, he set them loose. A dark, tragic day for America. Congressman Jason Crow, President Trump's pardon of January 6th insurrectionists, disrespects the police who fought and died to protect the Capitol. The rioters brutally beat police officers, threatened the lives of our nation's leaders, and attempted to overturn an election. They deserve prison, not a pardon. Matthew Gertz. Hundreds of people convicted of assaulting police officers amid the storming of the U.S. Capitol are getting full pardons because Trump wanted them to succeed and appreciated their effort. Shame of a nation. James Surowiecki. Did Trump actually pardon Tarrio? Even for Trump, this is nuts. Barbara McQuaid. Trump's pardon of January 6 attackers corrupts the rule of law, rewrites history. Those were not hostages. These were people who used brute force to commit vigilante violence. Aaron Reichler Melnick. This guy just got a full and unconditional pardon from Donald Trump. The man who dragged officer on January 6 gets more than 7 years. This guy, he got a pardon. Just a few of the reactions that I saw last night, and there's a lot more, obviously, and will be. I think that's going to be a story for days and I'm sure years. That's going to be one of the big flashpoints that people are going to be aghast at. Well, not everybody, apparently, obviously. A lot of people celebrating yesterday as a result of this. Including that Q Shaman guy who said he posted it. He's going to go out and buy lots of guns now. I guess he can legally buy guns now with the pardon. So that's obviously a very, very hard story to take and to understand. And we're going to be talking and thinking about that one for a while. All right. Well, I'm out of time. I got to get this show up. It's already almost 7 o'clock, and I've got to take the birthday girl, Ava, to the train to head back in the city to work before she starts her next semester of college. Ava's birthday, 20 today. Very, very excited about that. So that's it for the headlines. I don't really have any more clips for you other than Jon Stewart last night on The Daily Show, and then we'll get to my conversation with Michael Cohen. Stewart's whole opening was great. I watched it, but also just this part about the billionaires in attendance, that they all are white bald men, many of them looking like Lex Luthor. And then, of course, he makes fun of Elon Musk giving the Hitler salute twice. And what's really interesting is I think a lot of the people in the studio audience at The Daily Show were witnessing it for the first time, and you can hear their shock in real time. So it's almost worth listening to for that alone. Here it is.
Meanwhile, many dignitaries went not only hatless, but hairless, with a plethora of stocky, bald billionaires who all seem to go to the same biohack life extension clinic and say, "Give me the Lex Luthor." Yes, taking the place of seats normally reserved for Democratic or Republican governors sat Zuck, Bezos, Tim Cook, Elon, Tic Tac guy, Google guy, the 6 guys who control maybe 20% of the world's wealth and 100% of your nudes. You don't need to pretend with me. I don't know what he's talking about. Delete, delete, delete. Populism, ladies and gentlemen. Shouldn't this gathering be happening in a volcano's lair near Zurich? Or are we just open source Illuminati now? Where's the conspiracy fun in that? Honestly, there is not a useful app of communication not controlled by at least one of these individuals. And you may not be concerned that they've all ponied up $1 million to be sitting there and are kissing the ass of a president who openly threatens non-ass kissers. But trust me, shit's gonna get weird. Even by that afternoon, shit got weird.
This appearance of Elon Musk at an earlier Trump rally is getting loads of attention because of a one-armed gesture he made.
This one really mattered. And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
Okay. Charitably, I'm going to say that was just an awkward, my heart goes out to you gesture. Many of you might have done it like this. You know, even Taylor Swift has done that, my heart, but she almost never does the goes out to you. Like, just always stays with, but, listen, it's nerve-wracking day. You're not normally a public speaker. It's a one-off gesture. Please try not to use it again. Son of a bitch! You really want to make sure the people in the back see it, I guess. I'm just going to be generous and say maybe that was Elon's attempt at dabbing on the haters?
All right, there you go. Jon Stewart, The Daily Show last night, and that's all I've got for you because I got to get this posted. I'm really happy to have Michael Cohen joining me today. He, of course, is a writer now at The Daily Beast and contributes to MSNBC.com, but go over and subscribe to his Substack, which is always very interesting. Love Michael's analysis. He always says things I'm not thinking and things I don't necessarily agree with, but I love his perspective on many, many of the issues, and he's able to go deep and talk about these things with experience and a lot of credibility. Former speechwriter for the State Department. He is a historian. He is a member of senior fellow at the Fletcher School's Center for Strategic Studies at Tufts. Author of a couple really good books. He's written for dozens of news outlets, all the best. He's been a lecturer at Columbia, and I'm always happy to have him joining me here on Stand Up. Let's do it right now with Michael Cohen. There's Michael Cohen, and he has just sat through, as I did, the big speech. And now we have elected a felon, and he's in office. And how are you feeling on Inauguration Day, Michael? Thank you for joining me.
I'm feeling as though people are about to find out the giant mistake that they've made. I don't feel really good about this, and nothing that happened this morning or this afternoon has made me feel any better. In fact, as bad as that inaugural speech was, and that's arguably the most partisan and divisive inaugural speech I've ever heard, the speech he gave afterward to his supporters in Congress, in the Capitol, was actually worse. Meandering, self-pitying. I think in any other situation would cause someone to suggest this person be institutionalized. Just a really Trumpian performance that I think indicates that everything that we fear about the next 4 years is about to come to fruition.
You've hinted towards that twice. Maybe things aren't going to be as bad as we think they are.
No, they're going to be bad. They're going to be bad. They're going to be, I guess, define bad.
I think the thing that would most affect people in terms of how they think about Trump, in terms of how they might vote around the midterms, would be the economy. I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if he crashes the economy, which if he were to enact a lot of policies he says he's going to, with tariffs and taxes and deportations and other things, that would be easy to predict, and a lot of people are predicting that. But other than that, what else?
I think those are the most obvious things that you're going to see as being a problem. I think, look, there's two sides to this. Think about mass deportation, for example, which I have no doubt that Trump is going to try to.
I think we'll see headlines on that tonight. I think we'll see people. We've already seen people at the border crying. I saw it on your Twitter feed, which you're still hanging tough over there. I'm happy to see, but it's
for now.
You're going to see the pain. And by the way, just in case people, there's always the caveat. I almost feel like I said it enough times there. Obviously, people that are more marginalized, people that are living in more poverty, all those people are going to be far more impacted likely than a lot of more people. And I'm always worth mentioning. But what else?
Okay, so the mass deportation, I think there's going to be an immediate economic effect, which is that it could, if you deport millions or even hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants, is going to have a significant inflationary pressures. It's going to just raise prices because, let's be honest, a lot of industries in America rely on undocumented labor, the agricultural industry, construction industry. So all of this could have an effect on housing prices.
Landscaping, hotels. Yeah.
It really runs the gamut. But of course, that's one part of it. The second part of it, that this is just a very cruel policy that is going to split up families, people who are American citizens and who have spouses who are from elsewhere, or have children who are American citizens but whose parents are not. So I think that the effect is twofold. One is that it's going to have an economic effect, but two, it's going to have a humanitarian impact, and that's going to be, I think, rather unpleasant. Unpleasant, that's a nice euphemism for awful. It's just going to be something that's going to hurt a lot of people and affect their lives in a very dramatic way. I think that any hope that the government is going to run competently, that we have somebody, a steady hand in the Oval Office. I think we've seen this movie before in 2017, 2021. I don't think and look, there's also the issue of whether or not this president decides to abide by the rule of law. One of the executive orders today calls for ending birthright citizenship. That is in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. You just cannot decide, the president cannot unilaterally suspend a constitutional amendment. It would be like Joe Biden came off in 2021 and said, I'm no longer abiding by the Second Amendment and I'm going to confiscate all your guns. You just can't do that.
Right.
Now, I have no doubt that if he does sign the executive order and birthright citizenship, it'll be challenged in court and it will lose because the Trump position will lose because it's unconstitutional. Will he abide by a court ruling that says you have to observe birthright citizenship? I don't know. And I don't know who will force him to abide by that. That produces some trepidation.
But if he loses, he still wins because he signed the executive order. And if the Supreme Court doesn't go along with it, at least he tried to do it by unilaterally. And so he'll get some points from his supporters.
I suppose. I think whatever he does, he'll get support from his supporters.
That's
I don't
true.
know that it's really they seem to love the symbolic acts that he engages in as opposed to anything of substance. But here's the thing. He was elected to do something, which is to lower prices, to reduce inflation. And everything that he wants to do, it seems to me, would have the opposite effect. Now, from what I understand, there are no executive orders today about tariffs, which I think has led some people to hold this kernel of hope that he's not going to move forward with tariffs, which, look, maybe that's true. I doubt it. every piece of evidence up to this point has suggested that he fully intends to impose enormous tariffs on America's trading partners. If he does that, and again, every indication is that he will, that will have an enormous and negative inflationary effect. An enormous inflation, a little contradictory, enormous inflationary effect. It'll raise prices. This is not what he's elected to do. So will that create a backlash? I think probably among people who maybe voted for Trump because they didn't like Harris, not like Democrats, thought they needed to change. I think the potential for real backlash is significant.
You say that, and it brings up my greatest concern. The backlash, I think, that you're insinuating is that if things go to shit and that there is pain for people who had supported Trump or weren't paying that close attention, they'll be activated. They'll be affected by it. It won't be good for Trump and Republicans. But my concern, my deepest concern, is that what happens often is that things go bad and he's able to blame somebody else or not get blamed for it by telling a different story. And the fact that media is so controlled and siloed more than ever before. You are so stuck in your one channel. Whatever truth he gives you about why the economy crashed or why there's a pandemic or a war, people are going to be like, oh, it's Hunter Biden's fault.
Look, I think those excuses get harder to make now that it's his second time in office. Yes, people who support Trump, the true MAGA believers, are going to support him no matter what. We've seen this over and over again for the past 8 years. Actually, now it's almost 10 years, that they are going to back him no matter what he does or says. But that is not a majority of the country. A lot of people who voted for Trump in this time around voted for him because they thought he would shake things up in a positive way, that he would lower prices. They were pissed off at Joe Biden about inflation. So maybe, I think if they're pissed off about Joe Biden over inflation, they'll be pissed off at Donald Trump over inflation. Now, will this mean that he will be 30% approval rating? No, I don't think so, because he's Trump and MAGA world loves him. But along the margins, it certainly will have an effect. And we saw this in 2018 in the midterm election. We saw that in 2020 when he lost re-election. I do think that a backlash is probably coming. But look, a backlash will be coming no matter who, if Kamala Harris had won. There's always a backlash when a new president comes into office, right? When presidents do things, they don't usually get credit for them, and they often get a backlash, people who don't like what they're doing.
Right.
So I think, and we've seen this over and over again over the past 16 years. We've had 3 straight one-term presidents. Now it's the 3rd straight one-term president. And part of the reason for that is that there was an immediate backlash when a new president came into office. And so I do think that we just live in a very polarized time. So I just think that whatever Trump does will create some level of backlash. Now, I think it'll be heightened because the things he wants to do will actually make things worse for a lot of people, especially in the economy. But I think that backlash is coming no matter who was the next president.
Yeah, interesting and probably true. It certainly would be, you're the historian on this in many ways. It would be accurate to history. The backlash would be here anyway. What about any of these other executive orders that you're paying attention to? I haven't seen all of them. I think there's 10 being signed today. Put a desk out on the stage because he's a master of stagecraft. Obviously, that's his thing he's best at is selling everything as hard as he can and making a lot of money. I want to get to some of those scams and schemes that are already taking place. But anything else about the executive orders that you've noticed, Michael, or are paying attention to or want to mention?
Well, they seem kind of unlikely to materialize, I guess is one way I would put it.
As executive orders sometimes are known to do with any president, or?
Yes. Yeah, this is not, I think Biden had 9 executive orders, mostly about functionings within the executive branch. So some things like ending the Biden administration policy of allowing trans individuals to put an X on their passport book. He's going to end that, which is just cruel, but I think that will probably go into effect. But things like naming the Gulf of Mexico Gulf of America, I don't know that the president of the United States has any power over what is basically an international body of water.
I mean, by the way, let him. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, who gives a shit? No, totally. Who gives a shit? But things like that he wants to reenact the Remain in Mexico policy that he had in place when he was president. That does rely in part on Mexico going along with it, which they've made clear they're not going to. Things like he wants to increase oil drilling. In fact, we have a record amount of oil being drilled, pumped out of the ground right now. Oil companies don't want to drill more because that would actually create a glut and lower prices and lower profits for them.
That's a good point.
I don't get that much of an effect. Even things like get rid of the electric vehicle mandate, which he has vowed to do. He can say what he wants to say, but the mandate is still in place until a new rule is enacted, and it takes years to enact environmental rules. If I'm a car company, I'm probably proceeding with the assumption that I need to produce more electric vehicles. Who knows? Maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
Sometimes I've been listening. I'm committed to listening to all his speeches. I'm finding a way to honestly, emotionally deal with it so that I can understand and listen to a certain extent. Not so much I couldn't do during the campaign, but now that he's president. So one of the little things that he says, and it's worth mentioning, is I'm going to get rid of the vehicle mandate, so now you can buy whatever car you want. That kind of little thing to me, like they do create a narrative that somehow the government was preventing you from buying whatever car you want. There are more
you can buy any car you want to buy. You just get a credit. But actually, that's two different things. What you're talking about is the electric vehicle, the subsidy, the tax credit, which has to be overturned by an act of Congress, which may very well happen, actually. But what he wants to do is get rid of this mandate from the EPA that basically requires car companies to produce cars that produce less greenhouse gases.
I'm glad you mentioned that, but that still isn't changed the point that you could buy any car. The market is delivering more, I think, gas-powered pickup trucks than anything else to Americans with our our obsession with monster fucking vehicles. But it's also just so dishonest. Just be honest with people in terms of understanding. We all have cars and trucks. People should know that gas and oil are subsidized like $80 billion. That's why it's the price it is here versus Europe. But no one ever mentions that. No, rarely. Democrats, Pete Buttigieg, but it's like he talks about getting rid of these subsidies as if gas and oil aren't subsidized. And it's just so misleading. All right, I'll stop. I want to get back to you. So
that's okay. Look, you're obviously correct, but everything that Trump says is a lie. He's not an honest person. Right, and so I don't think we should be surprised by any of this.
Just want to take whatever opportunity to make the point about the subsidies that go to gas and oil. All right. He's back. He's in office. You're very concerned. We're all very concerned. How should we cover it? How are you covering it? And by the way, and I'm being serious here, like where is the one person that's making money just following every single thing that Elon Musk does and says? Everywhere he goes, every tweet, every space he's in, and the same thing for Donald Trump. Every post, I want a TikTok of their days, and others just watchdog them because this dude, I've been paying attention to him. He is something's wrong with Elon Musk. He's on ketamine or something all the time.
Yeah. One of the good questions about is if he actually is running this Department of Government Efficiency, which again would have no statutory authority whatsoever, is he have to get a drug test? Because if he does, that might actually be a problem for him, since it does seem like he's a big fan of the recreational drugs. But look, I think that's another example. The DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency, doesn't actually. They can create it, although there's been 3 lawsuits already filed against it. But hard to argue that it's something that is legal or that it'll have any effect. There's no statutory authority for this agency to exist. They can't cut the budget on their own. Only Congress can do that. So it feels like a lot of stuff he's doing is just symbolic acts that will appeal to his supporters, but have no practical effect. But again, to your point earlier, that matters to them. I can still remember going to campaign rallies in 2018 and people telling me how great it was that Trump built the wall. And when I pointed out that, in fact, he hadn't built the wall, I was told he's talking about it. That's a good thing. And that's how getting attention to the issue. They're willing to grant him the benefit of the doubt in a way that I guess people do to wayward children, but not to ways they should do to politicians.
The way that a cult does.
The way that a cult does. Sure.
I mean, it's something more than benefit of the doubt. It's a following of whatever he says is real. Whatever he.
Absolutely. Look, I just think it's important to keep this in mind. Trump won the election by 1.5 points, which is not very impressive. It's impressive in the sense that he gained a significant amount of support that he didn't get in 2020, but he didn't win by very much. He didn't win with a mandate to do all the things he's going to do. And I think in a lot of ways, I think people don't really understand or appreciate the effect of the things he wants to do, especially when it comes to things like mass deportation. The funny thing about mass deportation, if you look at the polling on this, people support the idea. But when you get into the specifics of what that means, that support tends to drop off quite a bit. And will Americans respond positively to images of families being torn apart and people being thrown across the border and workplace raids? I'm sure some will. I don't know that everyone will. Look, I think we're in uncharted territory. I don't think we know exactly how this is going to play out. I think it's worth noting that Trump has a lot more stuff planned than he did the first time he ran for president. When he ran for president was just a mess. This time he and his people around him have a plan
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's going to make them more popular or that they're going to be able to actually do it effectively.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I think that's the biggest question. It really is. How effective and will they be able to be? And even when they're not effective, will they just say that they were? I got to ask you two specific questions. Your reaction on both what happened with TikTok and how he got credit for it. That was a massive triumph yesterday. That there was can you imagine a bigger, better ad promotion piece of propaganda than your favorite app goes off? And then when it comes back up, there's a pop-up that says, "Thank you, Donald J. Trump," which was probably how it was negotiated. So there's that. And then he made like $60 or $70 billion on some kind of cryptocurrency created that I don't even understand. Those are the two stories I wanted to get your reaction to. They seem pretty big deals, both of them. And we're being flooded. We're being flooded, Michael.
Let me take the corruption one first. Trump was hopelessly corrupt in his first term, and I think it did erode some of his support. But I don't know that it's going to have much of an effect in the sense that I think people just have this cynical expectation that most politicians are corrupt. I think Joe Biden didn't really help with pushing back against that idea by pardoning his entire family today.
Let me get to that. I want to save that for last. Your reaction to the pardons last. Yeah.
But I think on the corruption stuff, look, he's a grifter and he's going to find ways to act corruptly. I guess I'm a little skeptical of how much an effect it's going to have. I think people already have baked this in when it comes to Trump. On the TikTok point, the hypocrisy here is really astounding since Trump was one of the people pushing for a TikTok ban. But here's the point I don't really understand. I don't care what he says via executive order. There is still a law in the land that says that TikTok is banned and actually creates huge penalties for companies, for providers, for Apple, for other phone providers that allow TikTok to be downloaded and on their phones. You look at what some of the members of Congress are saying, Republican members of Congress like Tom Cotton and others, they're basically saying, no, an executive order cannot do an act of Congress, which, by the way, that's kind of democracy, constitutionalism 101. Right. President can't decide. This law is no longer in effect. As I said, again, Biden did not helping by saying he would enforce the law the first day it went into effect, which was the 19th on Sunday. So will TikTok be back? But will it be around for long? I'm skeptical because the law is pretty clear in saying that either TikTok divests itself of its Chinese benefactor or it has to go dark. It's 90 days to do it. So I'm confused by how these companies that face stringent penalties for aiding TikTok in returning are going to do that, considering the potential legal challenges they could be dealing with. When you have members of Congress saying you're not immune from this law, so I don't know how that's going to play itself out. I don't know that it's a huge win for Trump. Maybe we'll see, but I'm not sure this executive order is going to fly.
Okay, what about the meme coin, $60 billion on paper, I read, or something?
I don't even understand what that is exactly. I just know that he's making money off of it. He's a billionaire all of a sudden because of it. Again, like I said, the guy basically bought a hotel in Washington and used it as a way to get companies and governments to line his pockets, and nobody seemed to care.
Do you think anybody cared about the optics of all those billionaires being in attendance today and all of his supporters being left out in the cold? Do you think that mattered to his supporters or anybody else? That all the oligarchy is forming and they're not even trying to hide it. It feels like almost like it's a bit. It's a reality show. Like it's all coming together. We're watching it and they're walking out in public.
Yeah, I am interested by the fact that Democrats are harping on this point. I guess they see this as a political opening for them. Yeah, I think this is a political liability for Trump. I think that to be perceived as being – look, the one thing I will say about Kamala Harris is in her campaign, she made a big point of running on this issue of attacking Trump on the economy, but specifically on using the federal government to help his billionaire buddies. And it was a message that actually got through. I make this point over and over again that in the places where those ads ran, which is mostly swing states, Harris did better than she did in the rest of the country. So I do think that is a message that can resonate and perhaps resonate in a midterm election when the electorate probably be one that favors Democrats. But that's what I expect. I think that Trump has a high approval rating. Listen to me. He's basically at even with approval rating, which for him is high. And I expect those numbers will fall because that's who Trump is and because most of the country doesn't really like Trump, even the ones who voted for him. And they'll be reminded why they don't like him. So I guess that, look, with Trump, there's so many things that are reasons to dislike him. People who dislike him will find plenty of reasons to do so. And the people who were on the fence or who voted for him, they want the economy to improve, I think they'll be the ones that'll be bothered by the state of the economy, and they'll maybe glom on to his hanging out with billionaires as a reason to dislike him again. Who knows? I guess my larger point here, I expect Trump to pay somewhat of a political price for all the decisions he's going to make in the next couple of weeks and months, and that's the kind of politics we live in these days, in which there is a correction to every election. We see this over and over again.
Do you think that the legacy media versus you, me, and other independent media is more afraid to cover him? I don't know.
It seems that way, doesn't it? I don't know. It seems like they are bending over backwards not to piss him off. Does that mean the New York Times is going to go easy on him, or CNN? I doubt it. But it's certainly not. It's a pretty disquieting people like Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, are showing up at his inauguration and are having dinner with him at Mar-a-Lago. And that is upsetting, to put it mildly. Look, the proof is in the pudding. If egg prices remain high, he'll pay. As the New Mexico Senator Martin Heinrich put it, people voted for cheaper eggs. Now, whatever the hell this is. And he was referring, I think, at that point to stuff dealing with Greenland and the Panama Canal. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, if the economy is doing well, people will maybe have a positive view of Trump, and if it's not, then they won't. And look, I don't know if you know this, but mortgage rates are at 7% right now. Yeah, it's inflation is increasing. Yeah, the economy is in good shape, but there's a lot of reasons to be concerned out there. Yeah, and by the way, mortgage rate 7%, when you have a likely increase in housing prices because of the construction costs going up related to deportations of undocumented immigrants, that's not going to be good for Trump. How much does it matter? We'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, to get back to your question you initially asked me, things are going to suck because Trump's going to do whatever he wants to do.
Finally, President Biden, on his way out, pardoned everybody.
Yeah, he did, didn't he?
Did you get one?
I did not.
I'll give you one. I'll give you mine.
Thank you.
But it's his family, it's Liz Cheney, it's Anthony Fauci, and then there's people like Leonard Pelletier, who I was really happy to see, as well as
I was glad to see that also, actually. I think that was the right decision.
Great. Marcus Garvey, as well as 2,500 nonviolent drug offenders, apparently. I don't know. What do you make of not all pardons are certainly not equal. Some were really good and widely praised, but he pardoned his whole, everybody named Biden, apparently, for some reason. I'm not sure why they were necessarily going to go after them, but it's true that they would have launched investigations into almost every one of these. It would have wasted a lot of time and money, and I guess they still can.
I think the expression I think about is the process is the punishment. And was he going to indict these people? Probably not. Was he going to investigate them and put them through hell? Probably, possibly. I
and
can't
bankrupt
really say,
them. He's still, yeah. Anthony Fauci, what a terrible thing that would be.
The idea that you would even prosecute Fauci is so absurd. It's not even worthy of discussion. But
people ran on it.
And Mark Milley and so forth. I don't like really what Biden did, especially with his family. That part of it I'm bothered by, because I think it really does create an air of self-protection of his own family.
He did not give that dog a pardon. He should have considered that. You know how many fucking Republicans Secret Service he bit?
Commander should have gotten a pardon. I think you're right about that. But I guess the thing I'd say is I get why Biden did it. You've never had a new president before that has so openly threatened members of the former president's family, who's openly threatened members of Congress, as he did January 6th committee, openly threatened members of the military like Mark Milley. So I get it, and I'm sympathetic to it a little bit, especially with Biden's family. But I find it very hard to defend, because it is preemptive pardon. Strike me as, look, if Trump had done this, I think we all would have been up in arms about it. Now, granted, Trump is not Biden, and there's no moral equivalency between the two of them. Let's be very honest about that. The only reason Biden is doing this is because of Trump's threats against his family. But it's very hard for me to defend it, frankly. I'll tell you what I said with the Hunter Biden thing. And I think I was on the show talking about that. With Hunter Biden, my feeling was I couldn't really defend it, but at the same time I understood it was coming from his son, for Christ's sake. And his son has been through hell, and I think somewhat unfairly targeted by Republicans. And while it's hard to defend it, I also can empathize with it. I can't necessarily condemn it, I guess is what I would say. His own family feels a little harder to defend. And the January 6th committee members, Fauci, Milley, I guess I'm fine with it. They didn't do anything wrong, and they don't deserve to be targeted by Trump. So from that stand. And look, the fact is he did threaten them. He did threaten Liz Cheney.
Yeah.
He did threaten Fauci. He did threaten Milley. And so it's sort of like, I think it's a real gray area. I don't think it's a black and white thing. And I know a lot of people want to view it as black and white way. I struggle with it because I do think that this is an unprecedented situation. The threats against these people were unprecedented. And I empathize with Biden wanting to protect them from an unfair prosecution.
Yeah, I don't care. But I appreciate everything that you just
What do you
said.
mean you don't care? You don't care about what?
I don't think I care. I am glad he did it. When you give someone a pardon, it makes them look guilty. So that's not great. Anthony Fauci's response is, I didn't do anything. What do I need a pardon for? And that's fair. But at the same time, we just live in such a different world now. And I've been covering these committee investigations. And again, they'll probably still do them. That Republicans run out of the House, back to Benghazi and Fast and Furious and all these things and against Hillary Clinton. And it just, and Biden too. It's Hunter. It's such a waste of our attention. And I'm sure they'll still do those kinds of investigations anyway, but at least
look, you got an incoming FBI director who has an enemies list. It includes a lot of Democrats, included, by the way, Mark Milley, among I think Fauci. So from that standpoint,
and journalists.
Journalists. Look, I think this is something where I think there are a lot of black and whites in our politics when it comes to Trump. There's right and there's wrong.
Yeah.
I still see people today they're defending Americans or blaming Biden for Trump winning. I'm like, the hell with that. Americans voted for this guy knowing full well who he was.
Yeah.
Blame them.
Yeah.
To me, it's a black and white issue. But when it comes to stuff like this, man, if you can't see shades of gray in this one, I don't know what to tell you. It is not a straightforward this was right or this was wrong.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your shades of gray. I think you should have a section in your Substack called Shades of Gray because you do a good job at finding the nuance and pointing to these situations that require a little bit more thought analysis, and many things can be true at once and all that. But we want to make things binary to get ratings and sell subscriptions and yell at each other. It's this or that, but it's often not. And that's why one reason I like talking to you. There are others. Thank you very much for doing it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, as always, Pete.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you.
All right, there he goes, Michael Cohen. Go subscribe, truthandconsequences.substack.com. Let him know you heard him here. Follow him on the social media. All the links to him and his work in the show notes. Support this show with a paid subscription, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Write a rating review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube, Stand Up with Pete. That's a huge one. Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and all of the rest. I'm there. Find each other on the Discord platform today. Make it your effort to do that today. And support John Carroll, who writes and performs all of our music. JohnCarroll.org. I will talk to you tomorrow, you bumblebees. Hang in there. I love you. Bye-bye.